Hello everyone and welcome to a new video that I'll be doing hopefully weekly, barring any other complications or obligations that I have, here on the Insight on Esports channel called the Countdown of MonteCristo, as suggested by More Than Bob on Twitter. Thank you very much for the name. Last week basically I announced that I was thinking about doing a recap of each week's great games in League of Legends so that if you haven't seen all the matches, you have someone to whittle them down a little bit for you. There's just so much League of Legends in the world right now. So many games. Even me, who watches League of Legends as a full-time job, has some trouble staying up on all of the matches and really sifting through them in an efficient manner to figure out which games are truly good and worthy of your time and should be watched to understand the evolving meta, or just exciting games or particularly close or high-level games every week. So as a result, I'm here to kind of winnow them down for you, help you out if you want to just look at some of the very best matches every week, in my opinion. So that's what this new show is for. So this week, a lot of people on Twitter responded saying they wanted a spoiler-free segment, so I'm going to go through all of the matches that I think you should watch this week. And then after I go through those, then I'll start to break them down as to why they're interesting. So if you're looking to refine the list even further, maybe you're not interested in a game that I'm talking about for XYZ reason, then you can just kind of skip that one. But for those of you who don't want any spoilers, I will start with this segment, and we'll get the list going right away. For each week, there's not really a set number of games that are going to be included. Some weeks, obviously, will have better games, and I don't really want to limit myself. If there's like 12 good games or series during a week, then we'll do 12. This week, there happen to be 7 that I think are really, really worth your time, so let's get the drum roll. So let's go. Number 7 this week is going to be Snake versus IG over in the LPL. Number 6 will be SK versus Unicorns of Love in the EU LCS. Number 5 will be CLG versus Impulse in the NA LCS. 4 is Roccat versus Fnatic in the EU LCS. 3 will be JinAir versus SKT in Champions in Korea. 2, GE versus Katy, also in Champions. And my favorite match of the week, number 1, was OMG versus Snake in the LPL. Now, obviously, when we talk about LPL or matches in Korea, that these are going to be series rather than single games, and there's a reason. There's an evolving dynamic over the course of a series. It's interesting to see in the best of 2 or best of 3 formats how teams react to the previous game, because that shows how strategy can change, or conversely, in some cases, how it doesn't change, and you get to see a team win or lose for a similar reason again. So that can be an interesting dynamic to take hold of. So we'll be talking about multiple games, usually when those come out. So now, spoiler-free, time is ending. It's over. And we're going to go into the actual games themselves. All VODs will be linked below for ease of your clicking purposes. So you can go directly from here to the games, load them up, and take a look. So number 7 this week is going to be Snake versus Invictus Gaming. Now, the reason why this is number 7 is it is an incredibly entertaining match. If you love seeing Draven played, and in fact, Draven's also played in Snake versus OMG as well. Sorry, never mind. That was a different match. But anyway, moving forward, the IG versus Snake, we have 2 Draven games as well right here. And the very interesting thing about this is after a very dominating game 1 where Crystal on Draven really got out of control, we see a different approach in game 2. So IG, they start to adapt to this Draven pick. We get so much lockdown. We get the Sivir so that this Kakáo's Vi and Rookie's Lissandra can really get on top of this Draven, as well as Kitty's playing a very tanky Braum. So what's interesting here is the in-game adaptation that we see in Game 2 out of Snake, which is that they have Beast running a Blood Boil Nunu in the jungle, but he gets Mikhail's Crucible. So they have a Crucible on Thresh, and a Crucible onto Beast. So double Crucible to protect Crystal's Draven. He ends up getting 15 kills on Draven in this game. Part of this is some poor team fighting, I think, by Invictus Gaming. Kakao, in a very critical team fight, actually managed to ult Baka's Kassadin instead of the Draven. So there was a misplay, I think, by Kakao right there, as well as the fact that Kakao went for an early ball of Malmortius, which doesn't really make sense against the composition fielded by Snake. So there are definitely some mistakes here. It is pretty sloppy, I feel, from IG overall. Pokemon didn't have a particularly good series on the whole, but if you really like a lot of team fighting, some pretty sweet Draven plays, it's an interesting match, to be sure. Maybe not the highest level team fighting, a little bit low on the synergy, but this is one of those games that's just super entertaining to watch, and so don't have to look at it, I think, too critically. Just style points, really, for Draven. And the interesting adaptation from Snake with the double Crucible against a composition that really did threaten Draven in Game 2. So I like that strategic adaptation. I thought it was cool to see. So number 6 will be SK Gaming versus Unicorns of Love. This one is some really solid play, I think, out of SK. I like the Kennen pickup here. We see one of the trends that we saw in the LCS this week is lane swapping with Blitzcrank, and we'll be talking about the CLG game in just a minute with that. I think that that's a very strong style right now, just because you can get away with a lot of Blitzcrank roaming, and because he is so threatening in that lane swap situation. I also like the addition of Kennen here for Freddy. There's always a risk when you play Kennen because he's so dependent on his ultimate, and you can't really fight as a team with Kennen when his ult is down, which creates a lot of timing windows for the enemy team. But in this case, I think Freddy did a really good job with the Kennen. Part of this also was some really poor team fighting from Unicorns of Love. I really feel that they had all the tools to deal with this Kennen, because if we look at their composition, they've got a ton of peel. We're talking about, like, they had Gnar, Jarvan, Syndra, and Thresh. And really, that means this Kennen should never be able to get into ultimate. Either Power of Evil should be hitting him with Syndra stun as he comes into the fight. Should be pretty easy because he's going to be walking in a straight line towards you. Vizicachi can use his ult actually just to scoop Kennen out and tank the stun for himself. Kikis can bottle him up with the Jarvan ultimate. So I really feel that it should have been a lot harder for SK to close this game out. And I think most egregiously is that even though they Unicorns of Love seemed to have the right idea, we did see a little bit of a dive with Kikis where he did ult Freddy, but then the entirety of the rest of Unicorns of Love walked into the Kennen ult while he was bottled up in Cataclysm. So it seemed like they had the right idea, but like pretty poor execution at times. That said, SK Gaming, the roaming from N-rated was quite good. They still seem to have a few like vision problems. And N-rated's Blitzcrank mechanics were nowhere near what Afro moves were this week, but he still provided a lot of pressure. And Svenskeren, I think, had some really nice reactive Rek'Sai play here. So this, for example, is really good to see how you can use Rek'Sai to play all over the map at all times. So I liked seeing that Rek'Sai. I think Svenskeren showed a better level of Rek'Sai play and map awareness than we've seen from most Rek'Sai players across all regions so far. And then also, you have to give some props to Forgiven, who just had another outstanding game. And I mean, what a great AD carry player. So if you're an AD, it's really fun to watch Forgiven. Tons of great predictions and reactions on skill shots, good pressure. And Forgiven right now is just such an amazing AD carry who, he doesn't just farm or make these mechanical plays. He also knows where to be on the map at the right time to apply pressure and to create the maximum snowball advantage. I mean, this guy is really, by any standards right now, if he can continue this level, he's definitely a world-class AD carry player. Very, very impressive stuff from him. So a little bit shaky from Unicorns of Love. I liked SK mixing it up. They show that they still have a pretty dominant hold over the lane swap. And for me, SK right now is probably the best Western team overall. So going into the next game, it will be CLG versus Impulse. I will say that NA on the whole right now is looking pretty shaky. A lot of it, I feel, of course, is that these Korean players that are supposed to be in the league had some trouble getting their visas or getting into the States on time, so we had a lot of subs in week one, and then as a result, when they came back, these Korean players hadn't really been scrimming with the team, so there were some hiccups right there. It's really difficult right now to tell who's going to be good in NA because of these synergy issues that have arisen from the substitute situation. But that said, CLG versus Impulse, for me, was a little bit more interesting than their game versus Cloud9. Obviously, CLG played very well this week overall, going 2-0 and being pretty dominant. And I think the big reason behind that, for me, with this Impulse game, is we saw great play from Aframu. And in fact, Aframu was by far the best player in CLG this week. In fact, his ability to hit skill shots and threaten carries was so good that it really did gloss over a lot of team fighting weaknesses that CLG had at times, where I feel that he was able to catch people out in the front line, and CLG was able to blow up carries in a way that if he had missed those skill shots, I think a lot of the ult decisions by Link and Xmithy would not have won those team fights really at all had Afro not been there to land the crucial abilities. So in this game, Afro plays Blitzcrank. Fantastic map play from Aframu. Makes the hooks hit very frequently. In this game too, we get to see that very fun like Blitzcrank Kalista combo with the hook into the Kalista ult to drag people back even further. So great teamwork, I think, from Doublelift and Aframu in that regard. And also, this showed a very unique strategy in terms of a lane swap proxy, which at level 1 allowed CLG to basically mind game Impact into teleporting into the top lane and then 4-man diving him at level 1. Now, there is counterplay to this. This is probably not going to become the new norm in terms of lane swapping, just because if you ward properly at level 1, if you have an inkling that they're going to do this, you can see it coming. And in that scenario as well, if, for example, Impulse knew this was coming, they could have just had their AD carry freeze by himself in the bottom lane and then sent the support and jungler to bait a dive under the turret or to harass at Gromp, and that would have really screwed up this strategy, or perhaps caught double and Afro underneath the turret, so they weren't able to kill that front minion line wave, thereby getting the 3 caster minions to have it push out and freeze again. So this is really creative, and I really liked it. It's playing on the meta, but I don't think this is something that's going to work every time. There are ways to deal with it. If you just leave it alone, even if you don't teleport to the tower, it doesn't give you that much of an advantage. And I think it's a pretty risky maneuver. But that said, it was really fun to see and certainly worked beautifully. They got first blood out of it, really held Impact down right there. So if I had to pick a game from CLG where we see both Aframu's playmaking ability as well as some very smart mind games and strategy, that's why I go to the Impulse one over Cloud9. So I like that game. Pretty fun stuff to watch. So number 4 will be Roccat versus Fnatic. And I know a lot of people are really hyped up about Fnatic right now. They've been putting out a good showing. Ohuni and Reignover are playing surprisingly well. Obviously, Fabivin, I think, is a impressive mid laner. However, I think this shows some of Fnatic's weaknesses, where they go really too hard a lot of the time. They take risky tower dives without complete information, and I think that this is a tendency that enemy junglers are going to be able to figure out and counter as the season goes on. Fnatic will still probably be a pretty good team in EU, but for me, I think Roccat will eventually overtake them. So Roccat in this game played very well from behind, actually, and really dragged the game out for a really extended period. They punished some of these dives from Fnatic, so you can see how to counterplay against over-aggressive dives. And if you're interested in which plays are safe and which ones aren't, you can really take a look at this game, especially from Fnatic's point of view. And if you consider their vision and the last time they had seen Jankos, you'll start to understand that some of these plays, I think they're high risk, kind of medium reward plays, and so eventually this will be punished. And Roccat kind of started this tendency in this game. I think the biggest issue from Roccat here, though, and why they couldn't actually pull out the come from behind victory was that I feel their draft was quite poor. I don't really understand Jankos on Elise. Sure, Lee Sin was banned in this game, but I would have rather seen Vi or Pantheon, actually, because Rockat's composition was, they had Gnar, Elise, LeBlanc, Tristana, and Thresh. So you have this weird sort of team fight pick mixture here. And so considering that they had the Tristana and the Gnar, I think that having one more form of hard engage, because Gnar can't really initiate by himself. The Gnar ult is really more of a follow-up initiation. And so they really only had Vander with a hook, or Jankos with the cocoon, and Elise just really isn't that great right now in the current meta because she doesn't offer enough. Against a champion like Fabib and Xerath, I think that if they had more hard engage, where a Vi or Pantheon could just get on top of him immediately and then have Overpower go in, it would have been significantly more effective, and they could have gotten the team fight they needed. Instead, Fabibin was never really threatened. Part of this was also the way that Roccat played out the game. Nukeduck wasn't really finding good flanks onto Xerath either. So I think that if Roccat plays out, like thinks about what they want to do in terms of their team composition and then their win conditions better, either Nukeduck could have found more flanks, tried to get that vision control, or we could have seen a different pick out of Jankos. They probably, I think, would have won this game due to some over-aggression from Huni and Rainover, particularly in Tower Dogs in the top lane. That said, I mean, both teams looking pretty good. It was very back and forth. Roccat did play quite well from behind, so it's a good game if you want to see something like that. So number 3 will be JinAir versus SkTelecom, T1. And in this series, really interesting games to watch. This should have been, I think, a little closer than it was. Bengi, especially in game 1, gave up a lot of kills attempting to ward when he should have been coordinating better with Wolf, but Wolf didn't have the greatest game either. Why this is interesting from a strategy perspective is if you haven't been watching JinAir, Trace is currently the only player who's playing teleport top lane Morgana, and it's been extraordinarily effective for JinAir. They are 3-0 on that champion, and it's looking like an increasing must ban against JinAir. Pilot also played very well. This is a game that reminded me very much of Deft's play when he was on Samsung Blue. Very positional AD carry play, maximizing that team fight damage. And if you are an AD carry player, I think it's really worth looking at this game to see how Pilot positions himself and how he maximizes his damage in team fights here, because he doesn't have the greatest tank line with Morgana in top lane and Lissandra in the mid lane. Sure, they get a couple Zhonyas at the end, but it's really, you can't just sit there and wait for your ultra tank while he's just constantly taking damage and dish out damage in response. You as an AD carry have to time your attacks around the Zhonya's immunity and a couple ults. So I think it takes a little bit more skill and really shows how Pilot is able to anticipate and play around his teammates' abilities rather than just a tank with a huge amount of tank stats and items. So really nice play there. And also, if you want to play Morgana top lane, no better way to look at it from Trace. JinAir has been playing a very push-focused style. They like getting this Morgana on top, not only for her crowd control and initiating abilities in the mid and late game, but just because it puts so much pressure on the turrets early and can chip away towers and get you an earlier turret than you might normally have. So that's worth it. That's worth checking out. And then game 2 as well. GBM, just a fantastic game on Ahri. Really well played by the whole team. Again, another standout game from Pilot. And Faker, again, kind of getting that first pick Xerath and being countered. This is a great game for GBM's positioning. And also how you take out a Xerath. I feel that, going back to the last game where we were talking about Roccat versus Fnatic, this is how you deal with that Xerath pick. Even a player who's very good on Xerath and is Faker got shut down. GBM really able to punish with some good flanks and some good positioning and very good skill shot dodging. So fun stuff to see there. Number 2 is going to be GE versus KT. Some people might be confused by this because KT really isn't the best team, and this series is super one-sided, but this is fun. This game is this high and this fun because it shows a composition which Doe and I call the Juggermaw composition, where Prey plays Kog'Maw, and he's really the only AD carry to consistently play Kog'Maw. And then on top of that, they play a style where Kog'Maw is the front line, where Prey will bait you into the rest of the team, and they have a Lulu, a Lee Sin, with a lot of shields. They'll have speed up abilities from Nami, from Lulu as well. So basically, they bait you into engaging on Prey, Wild Growth Prey, and then have him zoom around, just auto-attacking the entire time. So it's really, really fun to watch, and it's very unique because no team in the world besides GE is doing this these days. They actually played this composition twice in a row, so it's a lot of poke, it's a lot of very meticulous team fighting, and it really shows how good, not only how good Prey's positioning is as an AD, but also the fact that his team is able to back him up so well and play around him being right in the front, constantly poking, constantly in the enemy's face, as well as encouraging them to engage onto a supposedly vulnerable AD carry, and then just piling movement and speed and shields onto him, and extra HP with Wild Growth. So just really, really near flawless, I would say, team fighting from GE. KT, not the best team, but damn, this game is fun to watch, and it's also a creative composition that you won't find anywhere else in the world. So that brings us to our number one match from this week, and that will be OMG versus Snake. Now, these are two of the top three teams currently in the standings of LPL, and in game one, we see a very interesting style of play coming in from Snake. They are very heavily emphasizing team fighting, but they get Baka Xerath. Now, this is a champion that Baka should not be allowed to get anymore. It's by far his best champion, and he has another outstanding game on it. It's not particularly difficult because he has a top lane Jarvan, a jungle Nunu, and a Janna to help out with the peel and create zones in the front line. And Crystal plays Tristana in this game. Obviously, blood boiling Tristana late will really spiral things out of control. OMG goes for a more mid-game focused composition. They've got a Rengar, a Lissandra, and a Sivir, but the Sivir is not really going to be able to get into the back line or close enough to auto vital targets on Snake late because of the long range of Xerath and Tristana and the sheer degree of protection that they have. So Cool plays Cassiopeia, but again, a champion that really isn't going to be able to get into any squishy targets whatsoever. So this is a great example of team fighting from Snake and a really high damage late game composition. So you can really start to see scaling from Snake here. They play into the late game very well. You can see how efficiently they ramp and really hit that late game power spike. So this game's worth watching, I think, for Snake's team fighting. Very, very well played. Then in game two, we see OMG return to their strengths a little bit. They decide to ban Xerath, a smart move. Baka doesn't have as big of a game on Syndra. And instead, we see what OMG's strengths are right now. Now, OMG is a team that is solid at team fighting, but OMG also, this is a great game that highlights both OMG's strengths and weaknesses. This game, they go for big individual outplay as champions. We see going on Aurelia, we see Cool onto Fizz, we see Uzi once again onto Sivir. So in this situation, there's a lot of lane bowling from Uzi early. There's Cool with that big assassin in Fizz. We have going with his ability to split push and take down single targets with Aurelia. So OMG still showing the same weakness, though, that they lack good vision control, and they're more of a brute force team that player by player is able to individually outplay their opponent. And I think this is a big weakness for OMG, especially when we start getting into international tournaments and they have to play against Korean teams. That lack of vision, and I don't think they're going to be able to bully their opponents as hard as they can in some of these games, but it is impressive to watch just from an individual perspective in this game. So in game 1 of this series, you get some really good team fighting out of Snake, and you get to see a lot of that huge late game damage. And in game 2, you get to see what is OMG right now, which is massive outplay potential from each of their 3 lanes. They have carry threats in each of their 3 lanes. So it's a back and forth series, very different styles of games, and I think both teams sort of playing to their strengths right here, as well as getting some signature champions on both sides of the match. So that'll be it for this week. Hope you guys liked it. Any feedback, just hit me up on Twitter at GGC MonteCristo. Obviously, there are no graphics or anything yet. I'll be working on that in the future. Just wanted to get this first video out so that people could review before the matches really start in earnest this next week. So please give me some feedback, and I'll just continue to make this, level it up a little bit as we go on, and let me know if you liked it or if there's anything I can change. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next week.